This is Breaking Down Security.
Shreeraj, can you walk me through how local storage can be accessed via cross-site scripting?
So what we have is local storage has its own API. So web storage there is an interface which is created called storage, and that storage interface would have a call called get item and set item, or a remove item, or say clear. So that particular function you can use via DOM, so through JavaScript. So say, for example, you want to store something onto your local storage, then you can say local storage dot length, or say local storage dot get item, or local storage dot set item, and so on. So pretty much like you can store that particular information right in your browser's DOM to your local storage, which is created at DOM to DOM, or application to application. So
is this
then
per
what you can,
application, or is it just the web browser in general, or the session?
No, it is exactly like a session cookie. So say, for example, you create a local storage on google.com, then just the google.com can access that particular local storage.
Okay, got it.
As soon as you move to yahoo.com, so it is local storage is again a kind of a same origin policy, kind of a sandbox. So it's create a sandbox into your domain, and then you can store this information in local storage. You can say local storage dot set item, and then say, for example, name, and then actual name you want to store. So now whenever you want to grab that information, you can say get item and fetch the same information.
Yeah, I don't see how that can't be a security issue. I mean, if you can have something on a JavaScript page that can say dump local storage of the user, then they would get all the information of every site that you visited, including I assume the local storage would also store things of like authentication type procedures.
It's a local storage is pretty much like it's a developer's area. So say, for example, if I'm writing my site, say foo.com, and you visit my site, so now my application is designed in such a way that as soon as you authenticate, I want to dump 30 variables into your local storage. So while you are accessing my application on foo.com, you don't have to make different calls to me every time you want to fetch the information. So then what I as a developer, what I will do is I will write a JavaScript and throw at you, which will set all these different items right in your local storage. Now, till you are on foo.com, you can access this information. As soon as you move to yahoo.com or so on, you can't access this information. So now the attack vector for local storage would be something like a cross-site scripting. So then you imagine it's a single page site. So you have a cross-site scripting. Then what is going to happen is a payload for the cross-site scripting would be dump all these different information which is stored in your local storage and pass to somewhere on the internet or so on. So it becomes a more like yet another payload vector for cross-site scripting.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that way it's a well sandbox. It's not like a Word local storage is like, you come to my site and then I start scrubbing all the local storage which you have gathered at Google or Yahoo or so on. It's a pretty sandbox mechanism for a local storage.
Okay, so they've tried to build this with security in mind, but it's been seen that you can break out of sandboxes or get into sandboxes, I would imagine, at some point. So do you see that you mentioned OWASP having a different top 10? Do you actually start seeing things like local storage vulnerabilities that are going to have to be mitigated? How do we make it so that developers understand where, not to go overboard with using these technologies if they don't understand them themselves? Because it seems like to me a lack of knowledge will cause a lack of security.
Yeah, so some of these things, like say local storage or so on, is anyway going to be used by the libraries itself. So a library itself creates a Angular JS or so on. They itself leverage this local storage and creates their layered storage right in the application. So if you want to create arrays, or if you want to create some kind of data types which are Angular JSs or different libraries are supporting, those would use this. So from developer standpoint, it would be difficult to identify whether they are storing it via local storage, if they are going through some libraries or so on. But definitely, from the OWASP standpoint, the recommendation would be like whenever you store anything which is sensitive, like say for example banking information, transaction information, or so on in a local storage, then you can do some kind of encryption on before storing. So that way, what is going to happen is if you are even cross-site scripted, the content which gets out is encrypted or so on. So there are measures and countermeasures out there, depending on what you are storing and for what duration you are storing, because you can kill once it is being used while on the application as well. So all these are different content or a context to the application layer itself, with I would say the real context of the application as well.
So the encryption of local storage, is that the user would have to tell the browser to encrypt the local storage, or can the site that you're visiting, say bank.com, in case you've got a bank site, can the bank say, okay, we're going to use your local storage. Everything that we put into local storage will be encrypted and then decrypted by your browser. And what kind of level of encryption are we talking there? Is that part of the standard, or does it use existing ciphers on the OS?
Yeah, so there are nothing in a standard. In the local storage standard, there is nothing. It's up to the bank.com to furnish the mechanism for storing or mechanism for encrypting and storing via JavaScript. So it's all up to the developers how they want to store this information on the browser, as well as like which cipher or which kind of algorithms they want to use there. But now JavaScripts are supporting all these different libraries for encryption and so on. So they definitely developers can use that.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to find a library, I guess, to encrypt something, but the developer needs to know what to encrypt or if it needs encrypting, right? So it's
exactly
up to each individual developer to make sure that his particular code is developed in a secure fashion, I guess, or deployed.
Exactly, securely. Because now what is happening is like the single page application is loading things on a runtime when loading the application. So when you say, for example, if you log into your banking account at that time, after a login, they will ship you a lot of different data on the fly, which gets stored in the browser in some way in the DOM context. So they don't have to refresh and reload whenever you are fetching that information or want to see that particular information. So temporarily they get stored on the local storage or any other way in the browser. And at that point, it's up to a developer before they pass the content to a local storage, whether they encrypt things or not. It's not like we have in iPhone or in Android, where you have local storage based API itself. So like if you use that particular API, your data is by default going to be stored securely. It's not like that in the browser layer.
So my little brain's rattling around inside my head, and I'm thinking like downgrade attacks. Like bank.com is, saying, okay, our encryption is going to be set 256-bit AES. And with a man-in-the-middle attack, is it possible for me to go, okay, you know what, bank.com is really only setting, 40-bit, DES encryption is really setting that. So, hey, browser, set this and decrypt it using 40-bit DES. Is there a way to use a downgrade attack on encrypted data to pull all that information out?
It's pretty much like it's baked into a JavaScript. So that's where like it's not not that feasible. So already the logic is in the JavaScript. JavaScript is already loaded in the browser. Both encryption, decryption libraries are already loaded. So you can't pretty much do that with a man in the middle or so on. So it's more like a JavaScript doing all these things. That way it's not feasible to perform what you are saying.
Well, that's good, I guess. All right.
Is there anything a defender can do as far as logging or capturing what happens inside the DOM?
There is pretty much like the context in which you running your own function, that function's events and that function's calls you can trap and pass it on the console to see, or you can actually collect that information and send back or so on. But like pretty much from the development standpoint, what you have is your limitation is going to be just in the sandbox. So you can't have something going at the browser below level layer which you can capture. So pretty much like a developer can capture its own functions, what's going wrong or so on, but like nothing which you can say as some kind of a security events which you are logging in or so on. So maybe someone can try capturing that, but it's I haven't seen having a JavaScript written in such a way that they are keep on capturing their own logs.
What about someone who's trying to protect their users in the enterprise? Is there anything that they can do for secure browsing standpoint for their users? That's new to HTML5. Is there anything you can think of that a defender can do?
Other than that, other than from the defense standpoint, by default, if you look at then, definitely one of those things are HTTP headers. So you can say go for the X-frame option where you're defining origin. So you can pretty much protect against clickjacking and to an extent CSRF. You can provide XSX protection header. You can provide strict transport security. With the content security, definitely developer can provide things, but from the purely from endpoint user standpoint, there is nothing. Like it's pretty much like you are browsing any traditional site or HTML5 site. It doesn't make difference unless and until the site is secure by itself.
So how are new technologies like WAFs and web proxies and those handling HTML5? Is it a seamless process, or have they had to upgrade as well and understand the web sockets and web messaging and all those things? Have they upgraded themselves to allow for that?
Yeah. So one of the thing is two technology stack. Like, so first of all, like if you look at the process of identifying vulnerabilities. So when we say, for example, HTML5 based application is launched, the first thing you want to do is you want to put the real technologies like a black box scanners or a white box scanners to action to determine these vulnerabilities. So one of the problem is definitely from the black box standpoint, this technologies developers have created their own different streams, maybe a mix of JSON and XML or so on. So there is no traditional traffic which you can look at and say, okay, this is a GET request with these are the parameters, or this is a POST request and these are the parameters which I need to secure. This is the place where I need to look around for SQL protection and so on. So what have happened is these streams are now there is no just a query string and a post buffer. Now we have a post buffer which can have a binary stream. A post buffer can have different streams. So from the WAF standpoint, all these different streams has to be protected. So still, I think the WAF are more good in providing a protection to a traditional application where a name value pairs are going. So rules are based on name value pairs. and not like you can have a JSON-driven rules or XML-driven rules or so on. So there are XML-based proxies and XML-based firewalls, which are also evolving, which will provide a protection to your XML traffic or JSON traffic.
So the privacy issues must come into play here at some point too. I mean, we talked about the local storage with the bank information. I would assume that medical information or location data can be gotten by filling in forms on Amazon. There's APIs for geolocation for IP. How accurate is that? Is it just getting the IP address of the user who visits the site for whatever? I'm not understanding why somebody would need an API for geolocation other than for active defense, like we've heard in the past.
So I think geolocation API, if you are on a Wi-Fi, then I think you are the assessment is based on some kind of a IP or so on. And if you are on a GPS device or you are on a mobile device and you are doing HTML5, then it can have a better location. But definitely the API is supporting maps within the applications over phones or so on. So, but I haven't seen many HTML5 driven application leveraging or using those APIs like a geolocation API as such. But geolocation API can be used in a mobile devices more than a browser based application.
Okay.
So I read about this type of attack that the attacker can create a pop-up. Maybe it looks like your Microsoft Outlook login, something like that, to harvest creds. How would what would that attack need for an exploit?
I think there are APIs for notifications. So those notification APIs would give you a little thing on the right hand side of your browser or so on, or they can give a pop-up while you are on a browser page or so on. So you can create those pop-ups. Looks like it is some kind of a default pop-ups of browsers, or it's a default pop-ups of your OS and so on. So those notification pop-ups are like kind of a disguise you can use to create some kind of a dummy impression that this pop-up is actually coming from Microsoft or coming from OS, but it's not the OS pop-up. It's just a pop-up which is created by your HTML page. So it's more like a notification creating notification API, or some other API maybe in your case created this kind of a pop-up.
Okay. Now, what are there any tools that we can use to help secure an HTML5 application, like in the development phase, or techniques?
So there are no, like, pretty much HTML5 based application is on the client side. I would say it's all JavaScript. So it's all written in a JavaScript. So we used to do a lot of code reviews on our server side. Maybe someone is using Java or .NET application. So we are using all those kind of code reviews on the server side. Now what we need to do is we need to do a client-side code review. So which JavaScript libraries which you are using, these libraries are secure or not, what kind of a vulnerability which is already published in public domain for these libraries which we are using. And then we are coming up with the developer's code, how they are using the code, whether if they are using local storage, storing sensitive information through any APIs or so on, which APIs, which HTML APIs they are using. All these libraries also have built-in protections to an extent for XSS and so on. So if you are using those safe functions, or say instead of loading things through .html, you are loading things from .text, then pretty much your context is going to be treated as plain text and not the tags. So those are not going to cause some kind of a cross-site scripting. Also, we can do a dynamic scanning of the DOM. So while DOM is getting loaded, we can say what calls are coming and what calls are going. So that's all HTML5 driven client-side protection. And then we have to focus on a server-side protection, because now HTML5 is going to communicate not just in a name value pair. HTML5 is going to create XHR sockets or web sockets and going to communicate with the server via web services or APIs, where the traffic would be of completely different pattern. So if you look at the Dojo, it has its own structures. It's not JSON. It's not name value pair. It's basically it's their own structure which is going back and forth. So now you have to do a fuzzing on these different structures. It's not traditional fuzzing we are doing with name value pair. You have a username equal to, then say single quote, and then pass on. This is like you have a token and then colon and then a value. So now this token is actually mapped to a username. So there is no username, but there is just a token. Now when this particular whole structure which goes on the server would know that, okay, this token is assigned to a value called username, and then it process and pass on to the server. So a lot of stream level protocol layer analyzer, which is going to be our tricky ones. And then definitely the authentication piece and authorization piece, which needs to be covered, be in an MVC architecture. So what we have seen in the field is that there is not much out there yet to do things in the automated fashion. But more from the manual standpoint, someone who is doing the pen testing or testing the application can do a lot of different things rather than these automated tools which are going to create a sense security rather than the real security.
Yeah, so you mentioned the fuzzing, and I can see where our pen tester would take an interception proxy and then try and fuzz those particular fields.
Right.
Or for the WebSocket calls.
Right. So pretty much like say for example, I'm analyzing this application, and this application is using Dojo library or any other DWR library. Then I need to understand that what kind of a structure would have a DWR library would have. So when I make a login call, there is a two session. One is a session which is created at the web server level. And then there is a session which is created at a JavaScript level. So then in that thing, you will have a structure where all these different information is stored. So now you have to pick those information and fuzz those variables right there. Compared to if you have a traditional post call, then you can easily see that, okay, this is the button. When I click this button, okay, this is the field which is getting translated. So fuzz here, so you will get the response back.
So, okay, if I were to try and get a pen tester for my organization, what are some questions that I should ask them to let me know that they're well versed in HTML5 and they can do a legitimate job at testing my HTML5 application?
Yeah, so pretty much like first thing is like you can ask about how did you check the DOM-based XSS? You can ask about did you check whether the application is using WebSQL, IndexedDB, local storage, or so on. Another thing you can definitely look for whether app cache or file APIs are being used by developers on the client side or not.
But those questions are after the fact. What about if I'm looking for a pen tester and I want them to be well versed in HTML5 attacks or that sort of thing? What questions should I ask him if I'm just trying to vet him in order to potentially hire him?
Okay. So in that particular case, I think you can ask about like how would you make HTML5 driven threat model for a banking application? If a banking application is going to be using HTML5, what kind of a threats would be there? So then he will start thinking about whether the application is using local storage or not, and if you are using, these are the threats he's seeing. If it is going to use WebSocket APIs, then these are the threats, or so on. And then he start focusing on the server side, that what kind of whether the application is going to use APIs, web services APIs, whether it's going to use WebSockets, going to make a call to these APIs, or what kind of APIs are going to be accessed, and so on. So it's all depends on how he come up with the architecture review and a threat model. Based on that, you can take a call whether this person is knowing HTML5 or not.
Or, we could just cut out the middleman and hire Shreeraj and his organization over there, Blue Eye and Thai. So, we've gone.
It's all depends. It all depends.
Yeah. Well, it's good that it sounds like the application security folks are going to have no lack of work coming up in the next few years. I mean, they were having so much fun with, all the CMSs like WordPress and Drupal and those, and now they've got HTML5 on WordPress, which is going to just make their little carapaces cackle in glee. So, Shreeraj,
but in a way, like it's a pen testing becoming more structured as well, and because now you have a very clear cut bifurcation between a client side and a server side. So you will have like the entire JavaScript analysis you can do and see which function doing what, compared to you need to go around 30 pages and see what is going on. This is like a very decent 1 or 2 page or SPA, a single page application sitting right in your browser. All JavaScripts are loaded. So you can create you can open up the web developers toolbars, where you can see all these different things, which functions are loaded and so on. So it's relatively the debugging would be easy, but now the pen testers were just focusing on the fuzzing. They have to give a lot of focus on JavaScript based libraries, JavaScript based attacks, JavaScript based interaction, and so on. So that's, I think, the fundamental difference.
Okay. All right. Well, that's we've gone way over time this week, which is very, very cool because this was a very, very interesting topic, and I've got a bunch of other questions, but I'm afraid we're gonna have to make this a two-parter at some point in the future. So,
Sure.
Shreeraj, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to discuss HTML5 with you, other than through your consulting company?
So they can write a mail to shreeraj.shah@blueinfy.net. I can be help. Else, I have a blog at blog.blueinfy.com, where you can have a search label HTML5, where I have compiled a lot of different content from 2011 onwards. So they can capture that, and if there are any questions, send me a mail.
Very cool.
Or you can check the show notes. I got your blog in the show notes as well.
That's right. We got some excellent links in there for further reading if people.
And the HTML5 security cheat sheet, which is a very nice compilation of all different HTML5 technologies at OWASP, along with what they need to use for protection as well. So, like if they are using CORS, then what should be they doing about their access control allows origin and web messaging and so on. So. They can look around for HTML5 security cheat sheet as well.
Awesome. So, Shreeraj, are you going to be speaking anywhere that people can see you in the next several months?
Not yet. I haven't planned anything at this point.
Okay.
I used to travel till 2013, and then I cut back on my traveling and trying to write things on my blog and serving my clients and customers only.
No, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Mr. Betcher, how would people get a hold of you?
On the Twitters, at BetcherPwned.
BetcherPwned.
You got it.
All right.
Okay, I have a Twitter handler as well, at Shreeraj, at SHREERAJ, if they want to hold on to me on Twitter.
Okay, sounds good. The official Breaksec is at Breaksec, BRAKESEC, and you can find me at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. Thank you to our Patreon people for thinking that we're good and that we add value. And if you want to give in $1, $5, $10, $20, that's fine. You can head on over to Patreon and find us and give some money and support the podcast. It's always free, but if you want to say thank you in a different way, we wouldn't hate on that. So, DerbyCon's coming up in a couple of weeks. Hope you see us there. We're always wanting to shake people's hands and meet new people. So that's always a fun thing. So Shreeraj, thank you for coming onto the podcast. You're always welcome. I'm sure we're going to call out to you again to pick your brain on some things. I've got some questions that I would love to ask you about for another podcast. And if you have any thoughts or things you'd like to talk about, please feel free to reach out and we'll have you back on.
Surely. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to having me on the podcast. Okay.
Nice. So that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. And talk to you again real soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.